Everyone. My name is Dean Rains. I'm Vice Chair of the Planning Commission. Sorry for the delay. There's some traffic. We expect some other members coming shortly. So welcome to there's our chair. I'm going to pause and I'll let our chair continue.
There are two other members in the security line as well, so they'll be up in just a minute. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Okay. Get rolling. Now that we've already been called to order, welcome to the June 25th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting. I am Blanny Miller, Chair of the Commission. This is our final meeting of the fiscal year and before we break for summer, so look forward to making it a great one. Thanks, everybody. Public comment. We start every meeting with an opportunity for the public to comment on an item not contained on the agenda. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on an item not on the agenda today? Then, seeing none, we will move on to committee reports. There's one item, text changes 1A24 and 1B24, the Stormwater Design Manual update and related UDO changes. This item was heard in our June 2nd text change committee meeting where the committee asked staff to make some changes and updates. At the last full Planning Commission meeting 2 weeks ago, we requested a 30-day extension from Council to provide staff the time to make those changes. I believe those changes have now been made and are incorporated into our backup materials in today's agenda. We can turn to Committee Chair Nicole Bennett for any additional committee reports, and we'll also hear an update from staff.
Thank you, Chair Miller. We don't have any other committee reports, but I would like to hear staff present the changes that we talked about in committee but didn't hear yet.
Thank you. This is Sally Hoyt from this Raleigh Stormwater. I'm going to give a brief overview for the commission members who were not on the text change committee, and then I will address the most frequently commented items in terms of public comment, and will address the items that have changed since this was last heard at the text change committee. I will note that the response to public comments did not make it into the backup materials in the agenda. However, they can be found on the June 3rd text change committee agenda. So the response to comments is in that location. So I want to start by looking at why an update to the Stormwater Design Manual is needed. And that's because our current manual is dated 2002. We also have a supplement to that called the Guidelines for Land Disturbing Activity that's dated 2013. The proposed manual would replace both of those documents. In terms of other reasons a manual is needed, there's some parts of the manual, specifically all of Chapter 3, that is no longer valid based on changes to the state rules, the state's design manual, and text change 123 that became effective on May 1st, 2023. We are also seeking to address some ongoing issues that have been expressed to stormwater. One of those is we get the most common complaint that we receive is about drainage from infill development. And so we're attempting to address that, and I'll speak to that in a minute. We're trying to better incorporate green stormwater infrastructure, plan for changing weather, and then we also are introducing a new infrastructure permit that will help us meet our NPDES regulatory requirements for maintaining an asset inventory, as well as ensuring the quality of infrastructure that's installed by private development but is turned over to the city. It's part of the public right-of-way. This is just an overview of the topics being addressed in the manual. I'm going to touch on some of these, again, highlighting the major changes. In terms of our public process to date, we have brought forward actually 6 drafts now for informal comment in 2020, 2021, twice in 2023, and twice in 2024. We held stakeholder meetings in the 2019-2020 framework. We've met upon request with anyone who requested a meeting, including 4 meetings with the Wake County Home Builders Association in 2023. We've also presented to the Stormwater Management Advisory Commission most recently in September, December, and January. And as you'll see on the next slide, we've received over 600 comments, and we have responded to those in writing, and we've made substantial changes to the draft manual in response to the comments received. So this slide shows, on the left, it shows the comments received by chapter of the manual. And so you can see Chapter 2 and Chapter 4 got the most comments. I will be speaking specifically about those most commented on items. And then on the right, you can see who the comments have come from. The blue represents kind of citizens that we don't know to have another role as a designer or that sort of thing. Designers being the largest component, and then the Home Builders Association, and then vendors or other industry groups, such as the concrete pipe manufacturers is one of the commenters. All right, I'm going to dig into the content now. The lot grading plan is in Chapter 2, and that is where we are attempting to address drainage from infill development. And we're doing that by providing a number of options. And so these bullets represent the options. This will be for when infill development is adding 800 square feet or more of impervious area. So really, we're not talking about somebody adding a deck. We're talking about somebody doing a large addition or a new home or maybe an ADU with a porch. And so the options are to send the flow to the right-of-way or to a stream or an existing pipe, to discharge to a vegetated area. So think about like a lawn that is not too sloped where water could soak into it. They could construct what we're calling a surface infiltration pit, so basically a gravel pit for water to soak into. They could construct a rain garden, or they could obtain an easement from a downstream owner. We've gotten a lot of feedback about this, making it about the cost and the feasibility for small changes that we've previously made. These are not, I will highlight changes since the last version, but these are changes that we made in response to the comments. We added more options, we added rain gardens, and we have clarified that this will not be considered a stormwater control measure from a regulatory standpoint. This is just a technique to address drainage. And so we're not requiring site-specific soil tests, engineering drawings, calculations, easements, as-built, or annual inspections with these things that are required as part of the lot grading plan. This is an example of what would be required. So on the right, that's a typical plot plan that's submitted already as part of the process for doing an addition or a deck or a new home. And on the left, I've got a couple of examples of what the information could look like to address the lot grading plan requirements, basically identifying the corners and saying what direction they're flowing and what drainage option is selected. So is it flowing to the right-of-way, to the vegetated area, to the infiltration pit, et cetera? And then we're going to provide standard details that would go along with the plot plan for the builder. Another major concern has been flow leaving the site in larger development, so not the infill scenario. And so this one has gone back and forth a bit in terms of changes to the manual. It was in the most recent version. It was not in version 5. Basically, this dictates where flow can leave a major development if it is newly concentrated, meaning put into a pipe or a swale. Then it can go to either a stream to the right-of-way or to a drainage easement. And this is something that had gotten removed based on comments, but we got overwhelming feedback that it needed to be included to address the issue of upstream development sending large amounts of flow particularly to single-family home properties, which is something that is not a frequent occurrence, but it does happen. And can be, and it is something we hear a lot about. The next item is about the method for designing inlets, and this gets pretty technical, and I'm not going to go into all the technical detail here, but it was one of our most commented items. We are changing the design storm for sizing inlets from our current 2-year design storm to a proposed 10-year design storm. We have also added a blockage requirement, so you have to assume that an inlet with a grate, such as the bottom picture here, that the grate is 50% blocked. And we are changing the inlet type from the type in the top picture to the type in the bottom picture. And that's to improve maintainability and also for material availability because we're matching the DOT standard. So in response to comments, we've heard concerns that this would increase the number of inlets and increase the cost. One of the things that we did to address those concerns is that we have explicitly said, we've made this change in the manual in Chapter 4, that this criteria only applies to the right-of-way and public easements, so it does not apply to private driveways or to private parking lots. We did include some criteria for fire lanes, but it is a less stringent criteria. Basically, it says if you've got a 6-inch curb and water could freely flow over that curb, then that is sufficient. You don't have to produce additional calculations. But that if you had, say, a retaining wall blocking the flow, you would have to do calculations to show the ponding depth in a fire lane. Also, in response to comments, we did previously have the 25-year storm for some systems, and we dropped that down to the 10-year storm. And we did have a requirement for double inlets at SAGs, or at the low point, and we've removed that because we got feedback that that was redundant with the 50% blockage. So we've made some changes in response to comments there. This is something that has changed since, the things in orange have changed since the last text change committee. We are going to continue to return the SCM surety at the time as-built are accepted. We learned that there was a state law last year that precluded us from keeping it until the 1-year inspection, but we are going to more robustly define what is considered as-built and consider plantings as part of that. Another change we've made since the last meeting, we have gotten comments from the design community about what hydrology and hydraulic calculation methods should be allowed. We have explicitly allowed and disallowed some, but we have added text to the UDO that says that alternative hydrology and hydraulic calculation methods could be approved by the Engineering Services Department Director. And we currently have something we call a design exception process that goes to the Engineering Services Department Director. And the next thing I want to do is share some other responses to comment that get to how we're going to educate applicants and citizens about the changes. So the Planning and Development currently has an innovation team that is working on some processes and forums, and we are participating in that, and will be, once the changes are finalized, incorporating those changes into those checklists and forms. We are also, we've gotten comments from citizens saying we don't understand what's in the design manual, it's too technical, and we think that the document needs to remain a technical document, but we're committed to educating about the requirements, and so we're going to be adding content to our website to better explain the requirements to folks without a technical background. The other thing we plan to do, the way the draft ordinance are written, that the manual and the associated UDO changes would become effective 60 days after adoption. And so we're looking at having a website ready to go about 15 days after adoption, and about 30 days after adoption have some targeted workshops, one for home builders / small scale developers to explain those lot grading plan changes, and then a second targeting civil engineers and landscape architects who work on large sites and explaining the changes there. And then we're also going to update checklists for applicants and have those on our website. So we're already prepping to have those things ready to go so that we can roll with them once the final language is in place. So just to wrap up, the reason we're looking for approval of this new stormwater design manual is to provide clear guidance on the current rules, to address drainage issues between properties, to ease the incorporation of GSI, to require larger pipes and more inlets to accept rainfall from more intense storms, to result in higher quality infrastructure accepted by the city for maintenance, and to address our NPDES MS4 permit requirements and state laws.
Thank you very much for that excellent presentation. This item was already heard in the committee with comment from the committee members and also the general public, so I'd like to bring it back to the table for any questions and comments from the commissioners. Seeing none, I would like to entertain a motion.
I'll make it.
Thank you.
Okay. First, I'd just really like to thank staff for their hard work on this. We, as you saw in the presentation, it's been going on for quite some time, and I appreciate the engagement that has occurred over these last few years. And I also, we talk a lot about stormwater issues in our cases here, so it's nice to see that some of these issues are being addressed, and particularly green stormwater infrastructure. And I also appreciate the efforts that will be made to make this understandable to the average citizen. So with that, for text change TC 1A24 Stormwater Design Manual Update, I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated June 25th, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning text amendment.
We have a motion and a second? We have a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I would just like to add to Commissioner Bennett's comments, agree with both of those, but I would also like to thank city staff for taking into consideration associated costs with these changes, because that's a big issue with the development community. So I want to just applaud them for including that as part of their decisions on changes. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Other comments? Then with that, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Do we also have a motion on text change TC 1B?
For text change TC 1B24, Stormwater Design Manual Update UDO related changes, I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated June 25th, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning text amendment.
Thank you. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Then all those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously, 10-0 also. Thank you very much. Moving on to old business, there is one item on the agenda today. This item was on our May 14th agenda, but it was deferred until this meeting to allow the applicant time to continue discussions with the neighbors. The request has not been amended since it was last discussed, and our deadline for action is July 13th. So if the applicant or we would like to defer this item again, we'll need to request additional time from council. Is the applicant prepared to move forward with this item today? No. Okay. Then I might ask the applicant to come to the podium and either discuss the status or how much additional time is being requested.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. Isabel Maddox here, PO 3700 Glenwood, Suite 500, 27612. We're here to request, we are making progress with the neighbors. We have drafted some conditions and sent those to council for the neighborhood. This is a long process. There's some agreements and covenants in place we're trying to work through, so this is taking a while. We'd love for you to ask for a 90-day extension to give us time to continue to work through these matters if possible.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any discussion on moving forward with a 90-day extension? Then with that, I'd like to make a motion to request from council a 90-day extension on Z7022. We have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to new business, we have 3 items on the agenda today. For these items, we will hear full staff presentation and comments from the public. The first item is Z5523, the computer drive assemblage. This case is to change approximately 17.98 acres from OX3 with Special Highway Overlay District 2 to OX20 conditional use with Special Highway Overlay District 2. And we will turn to Bronwyn Reedus for a presentation from city planning staff.
Thanks. Good morning. Bronwyn Reedus, Planning and Development. So this is rezoning case Z5523, an assemblage of about 18 acres located kind of nestled between 440, Six Forks Road, and Computer Drive. Your deadline for action is August 24th. So as you can see, zoning in the area is predominantly a mix of residential at various intensities and then some mixed use as well. The site is within a office mixed use zoning district node. Right across 440, that is the East North Hills planned development zoning. Here's a look at the site and the surrounding area. The assemblage is made up of 7 parcels. Each parcel has an existing building and parking lot on it. Most of these buildings are existing medical offices. The building farthest to the west on the largest parcel, that's the State Employees Credit Union building. So you can kind of see how the different scales of residential are built out in the area, and you can see those nodes of commercial use and office use kind of built out as well. Here's another aerial view of the site, just giving some perspective on heights in the area. And then here are some views of the site from surrounding roads. So the first view is from 440. Second view is from Six Forks Road. Third view is from Computer Drive. The applicant has proposed 9 conditions, so I'm going to walk through them here. The first condition prohibits some uses that are otherwise allowed in office mixed use. The second condition limits office uses to a maximum of 500,000 square feet. Third condition limits retail sales uses to 150,000 square feet. The fourth condition limits residential units to 2,100 units. Fifth condition sets a maximum building height within 100 feet of Six Forks Road. So it sets that maximum at 80 feet, which is roughly 5 stories. The sixth condition requires green frontage standards along the Six Forks Road frontage. The seventh condition requires the property owner to dedicate at least 10% of units constructed beyond the 954th unit as affordable to the 80% area median income for at least 10 years. Also includes an option to pay $40,000 per unit that would have otherwise been required by the condition, kind of in lieu of dedicating those deed-restricted units. The eighth condition is related to stormwater. So this condition requires a developer to complete a downstream stormwater impact analysis, and if it is proven to be of benefit to downstream properties, to treat the stormwater for the 2, 10, 25, 50, and 100-year storms. And then the ninth and final condition here is another stormwater-related condition stating that the development will include at least 2 green stormwater infrastructure or GSI measures, sized to treat a minimum of 15% of the water quality volume from the site, also including educational signage to be posted at those GSI measures. So here's a look at the change in entitlement with the request. Again, you have that same base zoning district of office mixed use, but an increase from 3 stories to 20 stories. The numbers on the right hand under the proposed zoning, all of those are limited by zoning conditions. So this area is generally kind of richer in transportation options, higher walk score than average, higher transit score than average. However, not as bikeable as the rest of the city. And then this site does have much higher job proximity than the rest of the metropolitan area, scoring in the 97th percentile for job proximity. There is existing transit service to the site today. The site has direct access to the Route 24L, the North Crosstown Connector. This route runs on 30-minute service on weekdays and 60-minute service on weekends. The request checks all of the boxes for the affordability analysis, allowing for various different housing types and adding to the housing supply, and also including the potential for those subsidized units. This area is less racially diverse than the rest of the city, and less lower income people live here than the rest of the city. And housing prices are increasing faster than the citywide average, almost doubly as fast as the rest of the city. So the requested office mixed use, 20 stories with conditions, is consistent with the future land use map designation of office and residential mixed use. And we have a lot of urban form guidance for this site. So it is within a frequent transit area, a city growth center, and then also located along a parkway corridor for the 440 frontage, and a transit emphasis corridor for the Six Forks Road frontage. So along the 440 frontage, we do have the Special Highway Overlay District applied to the site. And so that kind of provides landscaping along that frontage and fulfills that parkway corridor intent. Condition number 6, if you'll remember, requires the green frontage along Six Forks Road, and that is consistent with transit emphasis corridor. That's an urban frontage, encourages walkability and pedestrian connection. However, there has been no frontage requested for Computer Drive, and with that frequent transit area designation, that would recommend an urban frontage be applied to Computer Drive to encourage walkability, let folks kind of travel along that road to access the transit on Six Forks Road. The site is also within the Midtown Area Plan, and that comes along with some special area guidance. So you can see the green frontage is recommended along Six Forks Road, which again has been fulfilled by condition number 6. There is some height guidance within this special area plan. Most of the site is recommended for 20 stories, so the request is consistent with that. But you'll see along Six Forks Road, the recommended height is 3 stories. So the conditions require a maximum of 80 feet or roughly 5 stories. So that is inconsistent with this height guidance for that specific area along Six Forks Road. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan overall and consistent with the future land use map. However, inconsistent with the urban form map due to the lack of frontage along Computer Drive. There are a number of consistent policies, 2 pages here. And then highlighting the inconsistent policies for you. These first 2 have to do with the height along Six Forks Road in the Midtown Plan being inconsistent with that. And then the next 2 have to do with frontage and street activation along Computer Drive. There are no outstanding issues. Again, your deadline for action is August 24th. You have 1 meeting between now and then, the August 13th meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions you have for staff.
Thank you. Then moving on to public comment for those in support. The applicant and those in favor will have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Madam Chair, before I begin, I'm informed that there are two members from the public who are here supporting the case but do have concerns and so don't really fit into the opposing category. If there are no other opponents, I wondered if we could just combine the time and let them speak in support and then raise their concerns as well without cutting their comments short or cutting mine.
Thank you. I appreciate that. If you're here to speak on this case, either in favor or in opposition of this case, could you please raise your hand? We see 2. Is that the total amount? Then in that case, I am happy to open it. I'll defer to legal counsel on whether I am allowed to open up the full 20 minutes to both opposition and support, or what might be the best way to proceed.
You know, it's grant additional time.
Okay. So we're hearing from legal counsel, instead of closing off or changing the method, we can just grant additional time for those in support.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Madam Chair and members of the Commission, I'm Jamie Schwadler with Parker Poe at 301 Fayetteville Street, here on behalf of the applicant, Atlas Stark. I'm joined by my colleague, Mark Frederick, as well as Gabe Gawa and Hunter with Atlas Stark, and Richard Adams with Kimley Horn, and Josh Shin and Jeremy Wooster with McAdams. The purpose of this rezoning is to revitalize an office park along Computer Drive, directly south of North Hills, to a development that aligns with the Midtown Plan policies and revitalizes what is an aging office park into something that has amenities for both the office occupants and potentially new residents. Given the site constraints, we are trying to adopt as much as the Midtown Plan guidance would allow, but there are some significant issues along the site, and there's also some protections in the code that I'll explain why some of those consistencies remain. The location here is on your screen. The site includes 7 parcels south of 440 on Computer Drive and Six Forks Road. Bronwyn did a great job in explaining the orientation and the commitments. I'll try to highlight why we chose the policies that we did with respect to the Midtown Plan and why those were important. As the Commission knows, the Midtown Plan was adopted in 2020 after years of citizen and community input. That gave me a chance to work extensively with Larry Helfand and others from the Midtown area and the CAC to understand that this policy and the small area plan really were very important to the community, and sometimes that conflicts with some policies of the comprehensive plan. But in this case, the site itself is squarely within the Midtown Plan area, and we've taken a great deal of care to respond to those policies. Also relevant is that further down from the site is another zoning that was approved, that brought forward by Atlas Stark, that will complete the Midtown Bridge crossing. That's not a part of this case, but is a significant investment by the same developer in this vicinity. Bronwyn did a great job of describing those conditions. I'll just briefly note that the caps were intentionally placed because we did understand that traffic was going to be a concern, that has been a concern in this area, and wanted to provide a reasonable cap on what we would be able to bring forward here. We did note the green frontage standards applying along Six Forks Road were important in the Midtown area plan, and that was something that it does have site constraints, I'll explain in just a minute, but does bring the building closer to the road and still provides the walkable and bike amenities that will be necessary along Six Forks, where there is no current funding to improve those road improvements, but our frontage along that area would bring bike and ped facilities as well as bring the building closer to the street. The prohibited uses are just typical of what you would find in an office park trying to be revitalized and brought back to life. The affordable housing is important, and I'll talk about that in consistency with the Midtown Area Plan, but note that there's only one other case, and Mr. Helfand provided those comments, in the Midtown Area Plan that has adopted the Midtown Area Policy for affordable housing. That was a Navajo Drive case approved in 2020. This mirrors that, except it brings it up to date with the affordable housing fee in lieu that has become somewhat of a standard offer as these cases have come forward. The two stormwater improvements or commitments that we've made were in response to community input that we heard about flooding in the area. We did provide the drainage map to show that we do not trigger that part of the UDO that requires the 100-year storm, but we've gone ahead and committed to it, and we'll provide a study saying we're committing to it unless this study shows that it would actually be a detriment to treat to that higher level, and that was worked out with stormwater staff. We are including that minimum to green stormwater infrastructure aspects and treated to size 15% of the water quality volume. If that's familiar, that's because it's the same commitment that was approved by the Commission and the Council ultimately in the South Wilmington Street case brought by Atlas Stark that had extensive review by stormwater staff and input so that we're not only using these facilities, but we're actually treating the water. And with that, both of those comments on the stormwater and green stormwater infrastructure speak to the comprehensive plan in important ways. I'd like to just take a minute to pause on the current versus proposed entitlement, because while we know traffic is a concern, it's a concern today, there's actually a significant amount of entitlement that exists on the site today that could be built. And that's in your middle column there. What could go on the site today without a rezoning if it remained at the OX3? So we would be capped at 3 stories, but we could still do a significant amount of units, 954, over 800,000 square feet of office and retail. We're reducing both of those numbers and increasing the potential residential commitment so that we can provide more housing in this area to help bring people into this walkable area and still revitalize the office itself and bring this more in line with what the modern office requirements are trending towards. And so with that, I will note that the Midtown Plan is shown on your screen. We've taken great care to adopt the 20-story height that was recommended and passed by the council in 2020. The 3-story height you'll note there is all along Six Forks Road, but you'll also note that that's just a consistent frontage. And our site up at the top left of the screen is the only site with a stream running through it. And so when we look at how we deal with the height, that came into play. So I'll quickly run through why each of these conditions were chosen and how they relate to each plan. Policy APMT2 discusses stormwater infrastructure, the GSI. We've committed to that in 2 important ways that I've just outlined. APMT10, land use transitions, talk about the transition from lower scale residential to denser mixed use areas, and that's where we're dropping from the 20 down to equivalent of 5 stories along Six Forks Road. The Midtown zoning consistency policy talks about the area guidance specific on the heights, and if they're not consistent, they should be deemed overall consistent if they have significant public benefits. We've seen this phrase before. It can mean a lot of things. In this case, it means the provision of affordable housing in direct response to that plan and neighborhood input, as well as the green stormwater infrastructure and the stormwater benefits. And in both cases, the staff found that those significant public benefits brought this case in line with the comprehensive plan overall. The same is true with respect to Midtown area height. Again, we're consistent with the 20, slightly higher on the 5, but because we've committed to those public benefits, the overall finding was consistency. Affordability is a big one. We've heard a lot about this since 2020, and the city has dealt with it in several different ways. Applicants have been creative in their offers in several different ways. But the Midtown area policy is specific. It says 10% of the units beyond the current entitlement should be affordable at 80% of AMI for 10 years. The only other case that's done this is the Navajo Drive case, and our understanding is that has not actually moved forward yet. We believe we have the chance not only to add to that precedent, but do it in a meaningful way and be able to come out of the ground and give the city another precedent for applicants to turn to. The best way to get more affordable housing is to approve cases that offer affordable housing, and we've done that in a way that's consistent with what the citizens requested. We've also just brought it in line again with the modern strategy of having that fee in lieu, but hopefully this will mean up to 115 affordable units are possible through this commitment. The frontage and inconsistency, again, I mentioned there's just a stream there that kind of interferes with that 3-story designation. So by combining that with the green frontage, what we're doing is instead of having a 3-story designation, we have equivalent of 5, but we're pulling the building towards the west side of the site as required by the green frontage and trying to leave that stream undisturbed. The UDO still requires bike and pedestrian improvements along Six Forks and Computer Drive. And the Computer Drive transitions have existing protections in the UDO that not only make them walkable, consistent with the Midtown area plan, but do step them back from the street. This shows the building massing standards that for buildings that are 20 stories or higher must have a step back of 12 feet before the 12th floor. And then they also have an additional restriction that's relatively new of a restriction on the floor plate size that allows that to be, or requires that to be restricted. So not only do we have a step back of in the actual buildings, but a kind of a restriction as the buildings get taller for that wedding cake feel. In addition, the UDO will require both bike and pedestrian facilities along Computer Drive, and so they have those protections in place already, such that we didn't think that the frontage was as necessary here. And so, based on that, the staff report does a great job of finding consistency with the FLUME, the comprehensive plan, major Midtown plan policies. And we also have a noted positive equity and climate change analysis. 97% of the HUD job proximity index, 97% on the HUD low transportation index. We're not displacing any naturally affordable housing here because we are an office park, and so we're just adding to that supply without taking away, and we're consistent with what the citizens have requested. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just in case anyone else has come in at the last minute, by show of hands, how many additional people would like to speak? Is it still 2? Okay, great. Then I would like to, without objection, I'd like to grant an additional 10 minutes for those in support. Please come to the podium and introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Cass Sharon, and I attended the community meeting about this project last month with my husband. We don't live in this affected area. We actually live at 2107 Reeves Drive in 5 Points, but my husband owns one of the condos down there at Barrett Drive, so that's why we were noticed about this meeting. At that May meeting, we heard residents who live nearby speak of concerns related to increased traffic, changes in traffic patterns, environmental consequences, the possible 20-story height, and whether affordable housing would be included. At that time, it was not. Since the May meeting, the developers added affordable housing to the conditions of the rezoning, and that's a positive development. Thank you very much for doing that. As it now stands, the affordable housing provision only kicks in after the developers have built 954 units, and then only 1 of 10 units will be designated as affordable housing and at 80% of the AMI. I believe we can do better, and I hope we will do better. Our teachers, police officers, firefighters, nurses, and so many others who contribute greatly to the city and quality of life are being pushed out of this thriving, vibrant place and all it has to offer simply because they can't afford the cost of housing in Raleigh. Honestly, if my husband and I had not bought a home when we did in the mid-1990s, we wouldn't be able to live in this vibrant area of the city. This proposed development provides an important opportunity to provide more affordable housing, particularly because it's on the frequent transit corridor. I urge the developer and planning commissioners and staff and the City Council to work together to utilize the frequent transit development option to incentivize more affordable housing. In addition to more affordable housing units, I would like to see them offered to households earning no more than 60% of the AMI or even lower. The City of Raleigh has said it is committed to creating 5,700 affordable housing units by 2026. The city recognizes that affordable rental units are limited and that the proportion of renters burdened by the cost of housing is nearly triple that of cost-burdened homeowners. The city's website specifically states that deeper income targeting to reach lower AMI households is feasible through affordable rental development. The developers of this proposed project are providing the city, our residents, and businesses a rich opportunity here. I urge you all to seize this opportunity to strengthen the proposal by providing more affordable housing units that are currently proposed and offering it at 60% AMI or lower. This will benefit both the developer and our community, including businesses who can attract employees who live nearby and help the city move toward its 2026 goal. We are all enriched when we are diverse and engaged with and living and working in community with one another. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Commissioners, Larry Helfont, Midtown CAC Chair. I was already introduced by Jamie, that's me. I normally stand in front of you to point out all the inconsistencies in a development, especially when it applies to the Midtown Area Plan. I don't have to do that today. As Jamie pointed out, the developer has been very cooperative with all the aspects of the Midtown Area Plan. They've included affordability. This is usually a very controversial point, especially for Midtown. As Jamie pointed out, there's only one other project, one, in Midtown that's been approved with affordable housing. This can be the second, and that's why I'm here today to support the project. Could they have done better? Yeah, I think they could, but the only policies currently existing within the city now are voluntary. And that's what I want to discuss with you today, basically. I'm going to try to shorten this up because Jamie covered most of the points I was already going to raise. Staff noted the inconsistencies with building heights along Six Forks Road, where the recommended height is 50 feet or three-story. I did pursue further conversation with the applicant since the property sits along the transit emphasis corridor, which encourages increased density. The affordable housing incentives in the UDO require 20% of the units affordable to 60% AMI for 30 years. A very nice touch, but nobody seems to want to do it. A policy that needs to be looked at again to encourage developers to actually utilize the plan. This one fits perfectly for that, and we've had discussions with the developer. This is just a possibility, particularly along Computer Drive and along Six Forks Road, to add more affordability in terms of more living space. They've already offered 10% above their entitlement, which is a very generous offer. It's not the best at 80% AMI, but that policy is 5 years old. It's something that I wish you'd look at for the future. The only additional thing I wanted to add, to keep time short here, was as noted in the staff report, frontage along Computer Drive has not been addressed. The applicant has included Green Plus along Six Forks Road. I'm requesting that the same frontage be applied along Computer Drive internally to enhance walkability. The other issue is height transition, as outlined in Midtown Area Plan MT10. The transition is appropriately addressed on Six Forks Road by limiting everything to 80 feet or possibly 5 stories. The Midtown Plan has 3 stories, but there's a provision for this again if you would go ahead and suggest that they follow the affordability bonus where they go from 3-story to 5-story, including affordability. And that is a request for the Midtown Plan. The other issue is transition. There's a 2-story townhouse development directly across the road on Computer Drive. And that's another reason along Computer Drive to make sure that building heights transition from low-story to high-story so that the neighbors sitting right across the road on Computer Drive don't have to look at tall buildings that are 20 stories high. By adjusting heights, moving away from low density to high density, that can be achieved, and it's not addressed as far as I know currently. It's just something I'd like the applicant to take a second look at. Without a site plan, it's really hard to judge what's going to be built. But the idea is with the cooperation of the applicant, it can be built including the transitions, including affordability, and including Green Plus frontage, which should be everything that the community needs. In the end, eventually, at the other end of Computer Drive, you've heard mention of the multimodal bridge. There's also going to be a connection from that point to the Greenway. It's going to run along Wake Forest Road. Most of the traffic will not be foot traffic will not be along Six Forks. It'll go internally along Computer Drive to make that connection possibly to the Greenway. So it's very important that we provide that walkability both within Computer Drive as well as Six Forks Road. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? Then seeing none, we'll open public comment for those in opposition. Since those in support had 20 minutes, we'll open it up to 20 minutes of public comment in opposition. But seeing none, we can now bring it back to the table for questions and comments from commissioners. Would anyone like to kick us off? Commissioner Fox.
I can get the microphone over here. There we go. I have a question about the frontage on Six Forks. It's not exact, it might be a question for the applicant, it might be a question for staff. Given the location of the stream, it's not quite clear to me where the building envelope would start. And again, I'm not asking for specifics that you would have at a site plan, but just the zone.
I think this is the largest area. So we've basically had the condition lined up for 80 feet to basically line up with that area on the Midtown plan. And because this is a stream that might have to be buffered, the upland portion would be here, and the green frontage requires the building to be pulled towards Six Forks with some buffering and planting in between. And so this area here is where that buildable area, obviously that green frontage is a big fat marker on this plan, but the building area would be in here, and that would allow us to try to preserve this area where the lowland stream is.
Okay. And do you have at this point some indication of programming on the site? Well, I'm struggling with the building footprint fitting there, given
It's
those
challenging.
constraints.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if a building will actually end up within that yellow zone. So I'm struggling with that.
It would have to be, I mean, we'd have to figure out access probably from an internal drive or some sort of stream crossing to be able to make that work.
Okay. And I saw you nodding, Ms. Reedus. Did you have anything to add?
I would just, would you like to hear more about the stream buffer that would be required if it
That
were
would be
required?
helpful.
I might call up Stormwater for help. But I think that would be helpful to understand building footprint right next
you.
to Six Forks Road.
So this would be the Neuse River riparian buffer, which would be 50 feet from the top of bank. And no activity could happen in the first 30 feet. Grading could happen in the outer 20 feet, but no building could be placed unless they received permission from NCDEQ.
Thank you.
Can I just
Additional
follow to
comments?
belabor it, because that's my MO. I know. Should the riparian buffer be required so that it's 50 feet on either side of the stream? And I know there's a little bit of topo there. Should it be determined it is too challenging to get a building footprint in what I'll just call that yellow zone along Six Forks, the process at that point would be Board of Adjustment? Because you would not be able to meet the requirements of the green frontage if you were precluded from having a building show up in that yellow area. You would have to go through the Board of Adjustment. It wouldn't have to come through as a zoning text change, like a text change to conditions.
David, do you want to?
So if there are conditions offered, they are not fodder for Board of Adjustment discussion. There's no relief beyond rezoning for a condition that's voluntarily offered. Your question is, can there be relief sought for a zoning district a frontage that's requested.
But it's requested by zoning condition. It's not,
Yeah.
that's the,
Yeah,
if it was, if the green front, if the zoning was CX, you know, GR, then I think it's subject, or it's available to seek variance relief. If the frontage is being imposed by zoning condition, that could prove problematic, seeking relief from the Board of Adjustment. I'd hate to say flat out it can't, because it's referencing a full provision in the code, but it is referencing it by, so it's imposing it by zoning condition. And so it may not be, I would say it may not, a variance may not be available to them that way.
I mean, just full stop, a variance may not be available.
Yeah.
Right. I'm seeing a conflict, is just what I'm observing. That was the point.
Would you like the applicant to respond to address that issue?
And I'll just add, the required build to in the green frontage is a 20-foot minimum and a 50-foot maximum. So that's that.
Yes, Commissioner Bennett.
So Commissioner Fox, are you suggesting that that condition is problematic if a building can't be put there?
Indirectly, yes. Yeah.
So could it be addressed just by rewording and saying if a building can be put there?
Yeah, I'll defer. If it went through staff review and there was no observation of there being a conflict, then I'll defer to staff judgment on that. I'm just, I guess part of the point is it a moot point to be concerned about the height along Six Forks if nothing's actually going to be along Six Forks? Or if it's challenging to get a structure there?
I think the footprint of any building located there is likely to be relatively small.
Yes.
Right? So it's, I think it's a little bit in question how big that area is, but, the blue line is shown in IMAPs right now is about, the deepest place is about 170 feet. So if you have a 20 to 50-foot setback from Six Forks, that leaves you,
And then a 50-foot riparian buffer.
right.
Right.
You're going to have it's going to be a small footprint building.
Right.
And so the idea that they've limited height there doesn't seem totally crazy. Because, I don't think they're going to build a 20-story needle there, do you?
No, I guess that's the
Okay.
point. I think it's a moot point. Is like otherwise, I would look at the staff report and see there's an inconsistency with the adopted area plan related to height. But I can't imagine anything going there that is not a one-story structure. If anything can be there, just based on where you would be able to have an access drive to it, it would completely have to be internal circulation. So, whereas I would generally say I would like to really contemplate a reduction in height to make this match up with the local area plan. I can't imagine anything going there that is more than a one-story structure. Perhaps a 3, right? But I think it would be challenging to get that there.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to address that point? Or have they reviewed this item?
Happy to. It's a good point, and it's something that we've struggled with as well, trying to figure out how that could be delivered. And I think you've nailed it. It's going to have to be a specialty building that has a lot of constraints on that area, and that's why the height might be necessary, but it'll be very limited, even if we could get something there.
Thank you. Other thoughts from commissioners on this or other items? Yes, Commissioner Alba.
I'd like to follow up on Commissioner Fox's comments. It triggered a couple thoughts with me. In the event that this Six Forks parcel right up against the road proves infeasible to develop, what would trigger, I guess this is probably for transportation staff perhaps, or planning staff, what would trigger the implementation of bike and pedestrian upgrades along that path? If there's would it be possible to subdivide this lot, put the stream into a conservation easement, and redevelop the CQ building, the State Employees Credit Union building, and then we would have current sidewalk structures in perpetuity?
So I believe Margaret may have stepped out, but my understanding is a subdivision is a Tier 3 site plan, and so it would still require all of those improvements.
Thank you. Yes, Vice Chair Raines.
Thanks, Chair Miller. There was a comment in the staff report about the frontage along Computer Drive, so I'd like to ask the applicant if they would be willing to address some of the recommendations for a green frontage standard along this, primarily to connect any pedestrian and bike access from Six Forks to the future Greenway connection and the bridge across 440.
We evaluated that, and my main understanding with the inconsistency is that the comprehensive plan and the urban form map want to see that frontage in order to promote the walkability that's so touted by the plan. But the UDO will already require us to have a sidewalk along Computer Drive, a 5-foot bike lane, and that bike lane to be buffered. And so we think the existing protections in the UDO really go to the thrust of why that urban form designation is there. And we're trying to, with all of the other constraints that we have and trying to figure out how we're going to be able to deliver all of this, had tried to leave some flexibility there because the code already provides those protections.
Okay, so there will be connectivity, but what about, is there any issue from staff's perspective on parking and related to the frontage recommendation?
Right, so the frontage requirements for an urban frontage would require parking to be not located within the front yard, so behind the building or next to the building, and also require the building to be located closer to the street frontage to create kind of a pedestrian feel, and reduce just the large parking lots up against the street. And then there are requirements for connections to a front door of a building directly to the frontage that it's applied to.
Thank you. I guess following up with the applicant, would they be willing to address some of those comments and revise that condition?
We understand the staff's concerns. I think we're just trying to maintain as much flexibility in the ultimate design to make the office park successful. And I think the market will drive those decisions in terms of having an attractive street to pull people in on Computer Drive. So that combined with the existing requirements in the UDO is where I think we are right now with all the other commitments that we've made.
Thank you, Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you. I don't often compliment the applicant a lot, so I want to start by doing that.
Thank you.
Can you pull up the very last slide you showed, Jamie? I just want to say I appreciate how you've addressed all of these issues. I really appreciate the section on the equity and climate change analysis. We talk about that a lot, and I really appreciate how you've laid it out here. I don't want to minimize the comments from Ms. Sharon and Mr. Helfont about affordable housing. I mean, it's great to see more, but I appreciate what you've done. I appreciate that it is consistent with the Midtown Plan, which we spent a lot of time and a lot of meetings on. You addressed displacement, you talked about it. This area is changing. We're aware of that. But I appreciate what you've done in this particular case to try to address those issues. And I just really wanted to say that directly to you, on the record, because I'm very critical of equity and affordable housing not being addressed in a lot of these cases. And I mean, we're challenged in this area because it is what it is. The ball is rolling. So wherever we can get some affordable housing, I appreciate it. And so I appreciate what you've done here. That's really what I wanted to say to you.
Well, thank you. I can stay here as long as you like.
The other comment I had is much more. No. I'm sorry. It's not a critique at all. It's more of a general comment, something we've talked about before with regard to traffic, because it is a big concern on Six Forks. And I remember having similar conversations about Buffalo Road when we were seeing a lot of cases coming along on Buffalo Road. And one of the things that I'd love to see more of, this is more of a general comment, I guess it's more directed at staff, is when we're doing our traffic impact analyses, that we're looking more at holistic mobility and not just prioritizing vehicles, particularly in an area like this that has an area plan that stresses walkability. When we do the TIAs, which I'm not criticizing the TIA at all, by default, it prioritizes vehicles. So it's making recommendations for widening lanes and adding lanes and signals, and we're not really considering the pedestrian and the cyclist. So I wish we could consider ways that we can comprehensively address mobility while looking at vehicles, but also looking at some of those things that work counter to a walkable area. If we're adding lanes, it's more difficult for pedestrians and cyclists. If we're not adding lanes, we might be allowing the congestion to continue. But I think we need to consider what our priorities are in these areas. And do we want to get vehicles through faster? I mean, that's typically what NCDOT wants to do, but it seems like the city has taken a position of really wanting to prioritize transit, pedestrians, cyclists. And if that's the case, then maybe making improvements based on a traffic impact assessment doesn't get us there. So that doesn't really have anything to do with your conditions. It's just a general comment when we're looking at cases along these highly traveled corridors like Six Forks Road.
Thank you very much. Other comments from the commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Peeler.
Cool. So two things. One is just in regard to public green space access. So I know, I'm aware that our UDO does not have great guidance on this, and I do wish it was different. But being that as it may, I guess there's roughly, is it 951 sites allowed by right now? Housing units are allowed by right, and that's expected to go up to 2,100 if this is passed. That is a lot of people in this 18 acres. And looking at the area, the closest public green space would be Eastgate Park, North Hills Park, or Rothgeb Park, all three of which are 1.7 miles walking away. Even having 951 people in a space like that up against the Beltline, I think would be, I'm just imagining living there, right, and not having any public green space on site. I know this isn't a huge site, but I think even in the form of pocket parks or anything like that, I would really want to see something like that in a development this big that is so isolated by drive-only access to any other kind of public green space. So that's the first thing. Second thing, I do want to comment on affordable housing. I'm very glad there's a voluntary condition in here around that. I do want to question the 10-year aspect of it. I know the Navajo Drive one that was referenced, that one was 10 years. However, that was 4 years ago. I believe. I believe that was 2020 or 2021. In addition, just in the past few months, this commission has seen voluntary affordable housing conditions that were, I believe we had one that was 30 years, and I know we had one that was 18 at the same AMI. If you look at the staff report, this is pretty much the widest and richest part of the city. And I would emphasize, I would really want to see these being on site and not with the voluntary pay into the fund option. This part of Raleigh really needs on-site units. I think at a bare minimum, affordable housing conditions should be 30 years. 10 years is a very short amount of time to have your rent subsidized. So yeah, that's my spiel about that. I would want to see, I think, something about both those issues before supporting this.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Fox. Thank you for your comments, Commissioner Peeler. That leads me to a question I was going to ask. Can staff remind me what the requirements are for open space when you do an apartment type building? I have 10% in my head, but I don't know if that's accurate.
So the 10% you're remembering may be the tree conservation area, which is required of all mixed-use developments over the 2 acres. So that might be the 10% you're thinking of. Open space is required in residential districts. Article 2.5, Common Open Space Requirements, is nestled under residential districts in Chapter 2. I'm not aware of open space requirements in the mixed-use districts. I'm searching.
While that search is happening, there's another question. There's no frontage currently contemplated on Computer Drive. Do we know what streetscape type might be used there? I'm guessing it might be the commercial type, but I wanted to see if there was an answer to that at this point.
I do have an answer to the open space. It is 10% is required for outdoor amenity area. Yes. And I apologize, could you repeat your second question?
No worries, no worries. The streetscape type that would be required on Computer Drive, if there's no frontage there, I wasn't quite sure which one would be required, if it would be the mixed-use type or the commercial type.
Good morning, Margaret Tartala, Transportation. I may have to do some research, but I believe because there's not a designated streetscape type, we would just use the cross-section for the streetscape requirements, which is a 6-foot sidewalk. So it wouldn't be that additional, which you would get with a mixed street or main street streetscape type.
Okay. A question to the applicant. Has the applicant considered selecting a streetscape type frontage that might supply additional green space or street trees, et cetera?
That's not something we had looked into in detail, but I think we recognize that to be a vital and repurposed office park to compete in this area, it's something that we're going to have to do to make that front drive attractive.
Yes. Who was next? Commissioner Otwell.
Thank you. Got a couple things to follow up on. First, to follow up on Commissioner Bennett's comments, I'd be happy to go ahead and criticize the traffic impact analyses. They've consistently overestimated traffic in this area and nationwide, and have led us to significantly overbuild the auto infrastructure in our city and in our state. And I think that they need to be reconsidered. But that being said, I'd like to follow up on the, I believe frontage is important on Computer Drive. It's more important for things besides just the bike lanes and the sidewalks. I think the primary interests facing the street and limiting the size of the parking lots between the sidewalk and the buildings are also important. I also want to push back on the idea that this is a walkable area. I think that's based on the fact that technically it's pretty close to a grocery store and decent transit. But to get to those, you have to cross the Beltline on Six Forks. And I don't know if anybody here has tried that. It is harrowing, and it is quite dangerous. This is a very isolated corner, and it is solely car accessible right now. A walkable community would include parks and schools and libraries, and none of this is going to be provided within walking distance. You have to cross to Midtown, to the shopping center, to get a bus that goes anywhere besides. The 24L is not a very useful line if anybody's tried to use the bus network. I think that the Midtown plan was developed comprehensively. And the idea of residential density here is coupled with upgrades to Six Forks and the Midtown Crossing Bridge. Honestly, I don't think either of those things is likely to ever come true. They're not funded, they're not planned. We couldn't even do phase 1 of the Six Forks plan in anything approaching the original scale. I'd need to see like guarantees of good frontages along Six Forks and along Computer Drive. And even then, I'm not sure that I can support additional residential density in this neighborhood until it's better connected. Thank you.
Other comments? Commissioner Bennett.
Just to clarify my statement, I'm not criticizing this TIA. TIAs in general, I agree with you, but I wasn't critiquing this one in general. And I agree with everything you just said. My struggle is this applicant has offered more than we typically see in this area. I try to be consistent, and we've approved a lot of rezonings which pretty much have allowed Midtown to be Midtown that didn't include this. And so one of the reasons the area is so harrowing is because of everything that's been approved up to this point. And so now we have an applicant that's addressing at least more than we've seen in some previous cases in this area. And while I agree it would be nice to see more, I feel like this applicant has done more than what we've seen in a lot of other cases. And so I don't want to penalize this applicant for the issues that exist because of approvals of other applicants' cases, many of which, I'll say for the record, I voted to deny. But I feel like we're in the situation we're in on Six Forks partially because of approving rezonings that didn't address a lot of the issues that this applicant is addressing. So I'm not going to penalize this applicant for doing what I wish other applicants would do.
Thank you, Commissioner McCrimmon.
I just want to echo Commissioner Bennett's sentiments. Oftentimes, we have a lot of applicants that come before us who do not present half of the things that this applicant has done thus far on their own and took the initiative. So I can support this applicant with clear mind and full heart because you all actually took the initiative to say these are the things that we're looking for, and we're actually going to do these things and not have to be asked for these to be asked to do these things. You're not perfect. No one is. We can always look for more things to point out that we wish we could see done. But I think Commissioner Bennett really hit the nail on the head and said, hey, it's not perfect, but we're in this situation because we approved other applicants who didn't do clearly nearly half the things you already done. So thank you.
Thank you. Further thoughts?
Yeah, I'd like to actually concur as well. It's easy to criticize something when it's laid out so clearly. That was your mistake. No, I'm just kidding. I'm like 85% of the way there, but I'm committed to voting in favor of this for those reasons. And any unsurety I have, I don't actually think is an unsurety related to the nature of this case. I think it's related to the nature of the detail in the existing code. So I just wanted to make that comment, but I'm willing to vote in support of this when folks are ready.
Thank you. Any other comments before I ask? Does the applicant want to respond to anything? I think we may push to a vote. Does the applicant want to respond to anything before we take a vote? Okay. Yes, Commissioner Haber.
Sorry. I was waiting until the end, hoping that some of the other commissioners would make just one comment I have. And it was somewhat addressed. I do want to start out by saying, appreciate all the comments. I would like to say the applicant has gone above and beyond. I appreciate all the work, the consideration of the Midtown Plan, working with Mr. Alfont and the community. So I know a lot of people that come forward to us do not do that. I think it's a fantastic plan. I understand Commissioner Otwell's concerns about connectivity, crossing the bridge, residential. I'm looking at this more of a Barrett to Computer Drive opportunity, and it's significant. So I think there's great opportunity here, and I think y'all started out on exactly the right foot, doing what we ask a lot of applicants to do that they, quite frankly, refuse to do. So I want to start out by saying I appreciate that. I'm 100% in support of this. I think to be consistent with comments that I've made up here, some conversations actually with the applicant, is about the frontage on Computer Drive, and a couple of my other commissioners mentioned that. I agree with Ms. Bennett, not we, this commission, but we as a community planning commission, we have approved a lot worse things. And so I'm not really hung up on this, but I would really like to ask the applicant to consider some type of conditions along Computer Drive. I agree with Commissioner Otwell. It's not just the bike and ped connectivity, which I appreciate. Even the fact that this applicant is expressing the desire and the willingness for the bridge, that's a significant commitment, so appreciate that. My concern, as I've expressed before, and even with the applicant, is just that urban form along Computer Drive, the connections to buildings. I just don't want the backs of buildings to Computer Drive. I'm not suggesting that they follow the urban frontage to a T, but I would just like to ask the applicant to consider some type of conditions that deal with connectivity to the buildings and just the amount of parking. Not that I don't want any parking, because I think it's appropriate. Again, it needs to be contextual to the site. I just would like to ask them to consider some conditions on the amount of parking and some way to address the connectivity, or even the way the buildings address the street. Even I understand a build-to-suit could come in and there might be safety issues. And so can you meet the condition? I understand the flexibility of not wanting a connection to the street. Completely get it. I just don't want the backs of the buildings or the sides of the buildings to address Computer Drive, because this is I'm not going to guess at the acreage. I tried to do a quick takeoff on Google Earth. But this is significant land area, and I just want to set precedent for the whole area. So I'm 100% in support. I don't want to tie the applicant into some conditions that they can't meet. Again, thinking through build to suit. I understand the market will sort of bear whether parking's in the front or the back, but I don't think it's too much to ask to just put some limits on that. I'm fine with the height, legal issues notwithstanding. Thank goodness for Commissioner Fox and her understanding of that. I was fine with 5 stories along 6 Forks. I think it's wide enough there, but appreciate all of those comments. It might seem minor, but again, I've mentioned this on just about any case that I've had concern, and so I feel the need to mention it on this one. So I'm just asking if they're willing to take a look at it. Maybe it's something that we can move forward and they can address later. But that's really my only concern about this.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to respond?
Thank you for the comments and recognizing the significant work we've done with Larry and Cass and listening to their requests as well as the Midtown area policies. I think with the Commission's permission, if they're willing to move forward today, we could take the summer to continue those conversations, to consider some of the comments we've heard today as this moves forward to council, meet with the district representative, and consider some of those conditions as the case moves forward. It sounds like there's consensus on the many things that we already have done, and I appreciate you recognizing things that we've done above and beyond what many applicants are willing to do, and that's to the credit to Atlas Stark for that. So with the Commission's permission, if we could move forward today and consider all of those comments as we move forward, that would be our preference.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Clarification, Bynum or Mr. York. Again, I know we're looking at some text changes. Just help me procedurally. If we move this forward with the existing conditions now, they will have the ability when they get in front of council to adjust those, or council could ask them to adjust them at that time.
Anything you act on today will be reported out to council next week. You know, we have moved to a different schedule to better align with agenda publication, but in this instance, did not want to hold items from today to be in front of the council until August 20. So anything you report out today would appear on the 2nd. Any item that the applicant wanted to, they could modify before council acts to set the public hearing. They can ask council to delay setting the hearing, taking that action until after the break on August 20 and wait till August 20 to set the, for the council to take action to set the public hearing. Or they can go ahead and set the hearing, and after the hearing is open and council is deliberating, at that time applicant can also revise.
Thank you for that. And again, I've worked many years with the applicant and their counsel, and so just to my fellow commissioners, I'm comfortable moving forward with their commitment to consider that. So,
Thank you. Any other comments? Ready to entertain a motion? Oh, yes.
I would like to point out that I don't believe anybody has agreed to fund and build the Midtown Bridge. I think that might have been mentioned during one of the presentations. The condition was to provide an easement for it in the case that it was ever built. And right now there is no plan or funding. I'd also like to say that without a frontage, that you could easily get buildings like we have on Six Forks with cowfish, blank walls, and vents. And I'm just not comfortable leaving that on the table.
Thank you. Any other comments or guests? Commissioner
One
Mann?
last comment. I appreciate the applicant's thoughtfulness and design and all of the aspects that they've taken into this this rezoning case. I know we stated earlier that we voted for much less, but the city has evolved. Demographics have changed, economics have changed in our city, urban form has changed in our city. So I'd like to look at it in a lens of now instead of what we've done in the past. I'd like to also echo Mr. Helfand's comments on affordable housing. I think maybe we can do more. Maybe there's a happy place in the middle that we can get to on condition number 7. I think condition number 7 is a good one. It's something that we very rarely see. But I think, as I stated before, times have changed, and I think maybe we can look at doing more in affordable housing. I won't go back over the frontage issues that Commissioner Raines, and not Raines, but Commissioner Otwell has stated. I agree with all of his comments about urban form. Overall, I love this case. I just think that maybe we can take a little bit more time and another stab at frontage, and also talk about condition number 7 a little bit more, especially with Mr. Helfand's comments. So that's why I said I'm 50-50 on it. I just want to make my comments. No.
Thank you. So I think we have a couple options. The applicant has asked us to move forward today. However, the deadline for action is August 24th. So we do have some options. We could move it forward today with a vote based on the proposed language in the staff report with respect to motions. We could also amend any of those motions to include specific recommendations to council on additional things they consider, or we could hold this item at the table until after the summer break. So with that, did Commissioner Lampman, did you also have comments?
I just wanted to express where my thoughts might be as well, and I think CJ provided good commentary there that aligns with my thoughts. I do think that there's more that we could do for the affordable housing condition. It essentially would require one unit at the 1,004th unit, which I don't know if they are even, I mean, if that would be a win at the end of the day, so.
Thank you. Would anyone like to attempt a motion? I think I see Commissioner Fox, yes, preparing herself.
I'll do my best. Okay. For case Z55, 2023, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated June 25th, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment. I further recommend that the applicant discuss with the local CAC leaders and affected parties, perhaps dealing with connectivity, pedestrian entry, location and amount of parking, and the affordability condition.
Thank you. Before we have a second, any other comments or friendly amendments? Well, then with that, do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Oh, we have a motion and a second. Thank you. Any further discussion? Then all those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those opposed? 4. Okay, that motion passes 6-4. Thank you, everyone. And for the 4 that voted against this motion, would you like to state the reasons on the record? We have several of your comments before, but the ones that specifically are leading to your reasons to not support this motion.
For myself, it's just Commissioner Otwell's comments about frontage along Computer Drive and Six Forks. And then also, after hearing with the CAC, I think more can be done about affordable housing with the condition number 7.
Frontage and affordable housing as conditions.
Yeah, I feel like
Before we
it's
vote
a great condition. I don't know how much of an impact that condition has. So if we're going to offer conditions, I want to make sure they're impactful conditions. So that's all.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd echo the same. I'd love to see conditions that are, again, look at the 30-year mark, look at on-site only, and aren't based on a percentage over X amount that is already allowed. You know, we have Raleigh has changed, as Commissioner Mann said, and we can look at lots of developments, particularly the big North Hills development right next to this, for I think a lot of lessons on how to developments better. And also with the parks comment I made earlier, I think having on-site public green space is absolutely vital to this site.
Thank you.
I echo those comments.
Yes. With the same comments? Okay. Yes, Commissioner Bennett.
I just want to add that the affordable housing condition, unless I misunderstood, is exactly what the Midtown Plan requested, right? It was 10% after the current entitlement is met. I believe that's what was on the screen. So
The Midtown Plan is not that specific.
well, the policy that they put up, there was a policy when the staff was doing the report.
There is a policy that encourages affordable public benefit be offered.
No, that was,
Yep.
during the report, there was a slide up here, unless someone made it up. And I believe Jamie was showing it, and it said 10% above the current entitlement. Yes. So if that is true, then this condition does exactly that. What I was going to say was if we have concerns about that, then maybe that's something we should discuss in strategic planning or some other committee. Maybe the policy needs to be changed. It sounds like it's the policy that we have an issue with and not this particular condition, because if the condition is consistent with the policy, then we need to take a look at the policy.
I thought I heard something different from.
It was a slide. It was a slide. I know I didn't hallucinate it. It was.
There is a policy AP MT13 affordability. Rezoning proposals that request 7 or more stories of height and include a residential component should include affordable units. At least 10% of additional units beyond the current entitlement should be affordable at 80% of the area median income for at least 10 years.
And that policy is in the Midtown Plan?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
So if I'm asked, then I could specifically tell council the reasons for the votes against and the reasons in favor. Are those in the motion? I could also state that for the record. The legal counsel could advise me. That could also be a friendly amendment to one of the reasons why this motion was taken in favor, that the affordable housing condition offered was consistent with the Midtown Plan policy, and that if there are concerns about that, then the policy needs to be changed, not conditioned to an individual rezoning case. Would you like to make such a friendly amendment to our motion to approve? Can we do that?
Can I add a possible recommendation to that? Sorry, go ahead.
Let me ask.
I was going to say, you had a motion, seconded, and it was voted on.
Okay.
And so in order to revisit that, someone voting in the affirmative needs to make a motion to reconsider. That needs a second, and then that needs a majority to bring the matter back and
Okay.
for a subsequent vote or a revision to the motion.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Peeler?
It sounds like we need to do that first before I say what I was going to say.
Okay. Would you like to make a motion to reconsider?
Sure, I move to reconsider.
Second. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, that passes. 8 to 0. Would you like to make the motion again?
Do I have to restate everything Commissioner Fox stated, or can I just add what I'm adding to it?
I'll defer to legal.
Mr. York?
You can say your motion is the same as Commissioner Fox plus.
Okay. With regard to, let me pull it up. Z55-2023, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated June 25th, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment with the same considerations that Commissioner Fox had added, and to add a note that council consider the affordability policy in the Midtown Plan, since we seem to have concerns about that particular policy and not necessarily the individual zoning condition.
Mr. York?
Which part of the policy? I mean, it's a three-parter, and it's a percentage, an AMI, and a length, and so.
Can I just reference the AP that Bronwyn gave us? I mean, it seems to be the policy, the whole policy that people were commenting on about the percentage, the length of time of affordability.
So the whole thing, that's fine.
Yes.
Yeah, just referencing that APNT.
What was the policy number, Bronwyn?
It's APMT 13.
Okay. That council reconsider APMT 13.
Thank you. Further comments? Or do we have a motion? Do we have a second? Second. Any further discussion?
I'd like to point out, I think it's very unlikely for council to act on those requests. They've not done so in the past when we attach riders.
Thank you. Then with that, all those in favor? 6. All those opposed? I believe it's still 6-4. Okay. Now it has passed. Okay, so the vote has been taken. Did you want?
I think at this,
And you didn't make your amendment. You didn't make your speech.
it might just make sense to just ask this question openly rather than.
Can I just say something?
Yes.
Commissioner Pillar, we just went through a whole exercise, and you voted against the motion. So I think before we take a vote, I think Commissioner Pillar, you need to make your statement before you vote against something, because we just went through this for you. So let's not vote in haste without you making your statement, because you voted against your entire process for you.
Further comment? Did you have additional comments?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I did not understand that it was just for me. I thought it was because we were making
No.
also with.
Open that up for you.
Okay. Well, then my comment was that what I wanted to attach to it is we have affordability conditions attached to our density bonus, right? That are in the same conditions are in the FTDO and they're also in the TOD. So I'm just curious why the Midtown plan would have conditions suggested that are that drastically different from what we also set out in the rest of the city through the density bonuses.
Okay, I believe that that is, since that is not part of the motion to approve, that could be included in the minutes as part of that, our informal minority report. Thank you very much. We can move on from that case. The vote has been that passes 6-4. Moving on to our next item, rezoning case Z1024 Kelly Austin Drive and New Bern Avenue. This case is to change approximately before we move on to that, I have to address one more thing. Rezoning case Z7022 that we heard under old business. We voted to request 90-day extension from council, yes?
Right.
And I'm told by legal that we also need to specifically vote to defer that case to a specific meeting. So I would like to make a motion to defer that case to our second meeting in August, on August 27th. Can we have a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? I believe Commissioner Rand, was that in favor? Of moving that case to our second meeting in May? Okay, thank you. That motion passes unanimously, 10-0. Okay, now moving on to the next item, rezoning case Z1024, 3102 Kelly Austin Drive. This case is to change approximately 1.97 acres from CX5 with conditions and Special Highway Overlay District 1 to CX12 with conditions and to remove the Special Highway Overlay District. So I will turn to city planning staff for a presentation.
Good morning, Hannah Reckow, Planning and Development. So this is a request to rezone one parcel, as was said, just under 2 acres from CX5 conditional use with a SHOD 1 overlay to CX12 conditional use and removing the SHOD 1 overlay. Your deadline for action is in August. And this property is on Kelly Austin Drive and New Bern Avenue. This area has a mix of mixed-use districts, predominantly industrial mixed use to the north, and then a mix of commercial and residential mixed use to the east and south. So just to look at the land uses in this area align with those zoning districts, so industrial uses and a Duke Energy substation, sort of northwest, and then a child care and residential use on Kelly Austin Drive. Some views of the site from those 2 vantage points, currently undeveloped property. And there are a handful of zoning conditions that are proposed that would prohibit some uses allowed in commercial mixed use, would require parking be no more than 2 bays and a single drive aisle between any buildings in Kelly Austin Drive, have at least 1 entrance facing Kelly Austin Drive, and direct pedestrian access between the 2. And then a residential density is capped at no more than 236 dwelling units. Office uses capped at no more than 65,000 square feet, and retail uses at 25,000 square feet. So the before and after here is the same base district. You have some zoning conditions restricting the land uses that are allowed. Office and retail uses are sort of changing minimally, and then really the residential entitlement is increasing. And then the height, that the size of the building that could be established in is taller than currently allowed. So this site does have a higher walk and transit score than average, a lot of proximate uses, slightly higher bike score than average. There is an existing route along New Bern Avenue, and then, of course, future bus rapid transit will run along this corridor. However, the site is not near any existing or future bus stations. Those stars are the closest in vision, so that's at least a half a mile, and there is not currently pedestrian connectivity to those locations. So the request would add to the housing supply. There are no guaranteed affordable units, but it would continue to permit a variety of housing types, smaller units, and smaller lots. Demographics in this area, residents are much more likely to be people of color than the city average, slightly more likely to be low income than the city average, and rents are increasing, but at a slower rate than the citywide average. So future land use map designation here is community mixed use. The requested district is consistent with that designation. A handful of urban form designations on the site, including bus rapid transit area, frequent transit area, that would want to see an urban frontage established. There are those handful of conditions that are similar to the parking limited frontage, which is considered a hybrid frontage. So the request is inconsistent with the urban form guidance. But consistent overall with the comprehensive plan. Consistent policies are generally on the topics of access to transit, the scale of the new commercial uses being capped, as well as zoning for housing and development of vacant sites. Inconsistent policies really on the frontage topic. This is a policy that's wanting to see a more urban form be established here. That summarizes the staff overview for you. Again, your deadline for action is August 24th. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to public comment. The applicant and those in favor will have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning again, Isabel Maddox, P.O. Box 946, Raleigh 27602. This case is a small lot on New Bern Avenue, very close to the Beltline. Hannah went over the conditions. I won't belabor those points. We have limited the uses in acknowledgement of the fact that the site is fairly small. Just mainly, we limited them in amounts to kind of keep the transportation impacts down. Important to sort of just have a good lay of the land sort of thing. Here's our site right here. You can see we're a decent distance away from the Beltline, so we are requesting that the shod overlay be removed, and that is to allow more height. You know, with shod 1, there's a 5-story height limit. We want to go a little taller here. This was rezoned maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and the developer was looking at trying to do a development here and realized that with the size of this site, with some other impediments to development on this site, he really needed more height to make it work. So even because you have, even with a 12-story height, you're probably going to, even though parking doesn't count as stories, it counts as in the absolute feet. So you would, I think the 12-story is is maybe 80 feet. And so a good bit of that footage would be taken up by levels of parking. So really needed more height to make anything work there. And then immediately to the south, well, we got a railroad line right here. And then we've got this large lot of a permanent open space down to the south. Some apartments to the immediate east, the daycare just north, and a lot of industrial uses to the north and west. There was recently approved a 12-story zoning sort of right around in here, sort of across the way from the subject site, which is right here. Let's see if we've gone through that. And we, as you can see from the multicolored map, there are a lot of different zoning categories in this area with varying heights. And there's more height going in these areas in general with the TOD. This is not in the TOD, but it is along that corridor. But the reason that we have some, well, that's just a map showing the open space, that it is committed open space to the south. But importantly, on this site, we have a lot of encumbrances along Newbern. That's the reason we don't have a frontage. So the frontage would want to be on Newbern, but we've got a major utility lines, both I think both City of Raleigh, water, sewer, also a large tree conservation area, taking up all the yellow areas are either tree conservation or utility easements that we can't build anything in. So the idea of having a frontage, bringing the building close to the street, it would not work there. It will be wooded, which will be nice, but it will be different than what the frontage tries to accomplish. So therefore, we have some sort of parking limited like frontage requirements vis-a-vis Kelly Austin Drive, which is this street right here, but it's just a small cul-de-sac street. So I don't know that that really accomplishes a whole lot in terms of, giving you that sort of urban feel. I think because of these historically dedicated tree conservation areas and public utility easements, you're really limited in terms of what you can do in terms of urban frontage. Again, there was a concept plan done 3 or 4 years ago, and they had this building and some surface parking, but really needed to have structured parking to make a decent-sized building work here. And so decided to come in and request more height. As I said, much of the 80 feet height limit in 5 stories would be consumed with actual structured parking. And it would therefore be an expensive site, and maybe you might end up with 30,000 feet, which really isn't going to be justified. The site work for doing that and doing structured parking would not be justified. So we do believe this is reasonable in the public interest for a number of reasons. It allows more height and intensity on the transit corridor. And there's not a specific development plan with this project. We've limited uses, but the primary use that my client is hoping to do here is a hotel, limited service hotel, which we think would support Wake Med, families coming with family members in the hospital. He has had some experience in developing hotels, and that's sort of his main objective. But we thought, well, we shouldn't take out a multifamily as an option. I don't know that it's a great multifamily site. And I don't think it's a great affordable site because, as you've heard, the transit stations are a pretty good walk away. So, it could be a restaurant. I mean, the hotel is his sort of target use. We have a significant amount of the lot is consumed by easements and TCA. Much of the height limit with 5 stories will be consumed with structured parking. To justify the expense, we really need more than a 10,000 foot footprint. So we'd like to go up a little higher, and so we get more square footage. We think it will foster and contribute to the revitalization of this corridor. And we have had 2 neighbor meetings. We had no neighbors attend. We had the city liaison person there. We had a nice conversation, but no neighbors. And we don't really have any outstanding issues in the staff report. We're consistent with both the future land use and the comprehensive plan, and inconsistent with the urban form only because of that lack of a frontage, and I've told you the reasons that we can't do the frontage there. So happy to answer any questions that y'all might have.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? Then seeing none, we'll open up public comment to the opposition. Those opposed to this case have a total of 10 minutes to speak. And seeing none, we can bring it back to the table for any questions from our commissioners. Any questions at the table? Or if you're preparing a question, could you wave at me? Yes, Commissioner Peeler.
I was just noticing there is no sidewalk there, and you mentioned this. I think it would be nice to see a sidewalk there. If something 12 stories, even if it is a hotel, I think that would be kind of like a bare minimum.
Well, I think if we develop there, we would have to do road improvements on Newbern, and that would include a sidewalk.
Okay.
That's the.
But that's not, but the frontage, but there would be no frontage change.
That's right. There wouldn't be a frontage condition there. Couldn't.
Okay.
We'd still have to do the right-of-way improvements, which would include a sidewalk, and I would guess a bike lane. Transportation could speak to that, but normally the full deal, which would be road widening, maybe, certainly sidewalk, those kind of things. But as far as on the private property, we couldn't do the frontage type treatment.
Any additional comments about that from staff? Looks like they're conferring. Nope. Okay. Staff has confirmed. Other comments from the commissioners? Questions? Then, seeing none, I would like to entertain a motion. Commissioner Bennett.
With regard to zoning case Z1024, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated June 25th, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I would just like to make the comment, since we went through a lot of discussion on the previous case about the frontage, and that's an issue in this case. Just to be clear, I'm totally in support of the conditions as put forward, just due to the existing conditions along Newbern and knowing what the code will require. So just want to point that out, since we had some robust conversation in the last case.
Thank you. Any further comments? Well, then we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes 10-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to item E3, rezoning case Z1124 at Lake Wheeler Road. This case is from the state of North Carolina to change approximately 17.87 acres from IX3 parking limited with conditions and with a special residential parking overlay district, OX5 with conditions with a special residential parking overlay district, and OX5 with no conditions with a special residential parking overlay district to OX5 with conditions and with the special residential parking overlay district. Try to think of another way to say that. Couldn't make it more efficient. We'll now turn to Matthew Burns for a presentation from city planning staff.
Good morning, Chair Miller, members of the Planning Commission. Matthew Burns with Planning and Development. As you mentioned, this is a request to rezone a almost 16-acre site from a variety of districts to office mixed use 5 stories with conditions and maintaining the special residential parking overlay. And your deadline for action is August 24th. Zoning in the area is predominantly mixed use. There is some heavy industrial zoning across the street. The site is split among several zoning districts, like you already mentioned. The IX portion is part of the farmers market zoning to the north, and the existing OX5 and OX5 CU portions are part of the Centennial Campus zoning. So west of the site, as I mentioned, is Centennial Campus and institutional uses, as well as Lonnie Pool Golf Course. North is the Farmers Market. Northeast, you have Dix Park. It's also fairly close to the Wake STEM Early College High School. East, along Maywood, approximately 1,000 feet from the site, is Trophy Brewing Company and the Carolee neighborhood. And as you can see, the Walnut Creek Greenway sort of runs along the south of the site and then across Lake Wheeler Road. The Centennial Bikeway sort of runs through the site on an easement, and there is an existing connector on site which connects the Walnut Creek Greenway to that bikeway. The site is largely forested and undeveloped, except for portions of Duke Energy power lines, which are built over existing easements. And that connector that I mentioned was built out by NCSU as part of a larger project to build out sections of the Walnut Creek Greenway. And plats for the rezoning site and nearby properties do not show an easement over the built portion, and it's unlikely an easement was recorded when it was constructed. Here are several views of the site near Centennial Parkway and Lake Wheeler Road. And here are some views of the Walnut Creek Greenway and the existing connector on site. You can see the intersection on the lower right-hand corner. Proposed conditions would prohibit certain uses normally permitted in OX, and limit office uses on the property to 160,000 square feet. This proposed rezoning so the site is owned by the state of North Carolina, who intend to sell it to Duke Energy for construction of a substation. And sale of the property is contingent on rezoning. The request would increase residential, office, and retail entitlement, and it would reduce industrial entitlement on the portion of the site that's currently zoned IX. Here is just a topographic and environmental view of the site showing there's a considerable amount of the site that's encumbered by either floodplain, flood-prone soils, blue line stream, et cetera. The site has a higher walk score than average, higher transit, higher bike scores as well, and high access to jobs. The site has lower transportation costs than average. However, it should be noted that the site is not served by municipal or regional transit. The nearest route and stop is approximately 1,000 feet northeast, and that's Route 21. The request would add to the housing supply, does not include subsidized units, would permit a variety of housing types, allow smaller units, and is within walking distance of transit. Area residents are less likely to be racial minorities, more likely to be low income than the city average, and the cost of rent has increased in the census tracts 63% between 2020 and 2022, which is considerably higher than the citywide average. The request and the proposed use are consistent with the site's two future land use map designations, which are public parks and open space and institutional. It should be noted that neither designation corresponds to a specific zoning district. Institutional uses such as an electrical substation are permitted in many districts. The request is inconsistent with the urban form map as it does not include a frontage. Some properties on the west side of Lake Wheeler Road feature parkway frontages, which is a type of hybrid frontage and requires buildings to be set back at least 50 feet. But as a reminder, the intended use is an electrical substation, and there are a lot of environmental features on site that reduce buildable area. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan, consistent with the future land use map, and inconsistent with the urban form map. Consistent policies include policies related to the rezoning and development of industrial areas and planning for energy infrastructure. And inconsistent policies are related to multimodal integration, greenway-oriented development, basically connectivity with existing trails. Your deadline for action is August 24th, and so your next PC meeting would be August 13th. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I think I have a conflict of interest, so I need to recuse myself from this vote.
Thank you very much. Without objection, I would like to recuse Commissioner McCrimmon from this item. So moving on, I would like to open up for public comment. The applicant and those in favor will have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
All right. Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. My name is Amy Kraut. I'm an attorney at Smith Anderson, 150 Fayetteville Street, Suite 2300, Raleigh. I'm here representing the applicant, Duke Energy. I also have Derek Remmer and John Carter with me from Duke to answer any questions that you might have. As always, we appreciate the support of city staff and partnering with the city as we strive to gain approval for that would allow us to construct this substation in order to increase capacity and reliability in an ever-growing area of the city. As staff noted, this property is located across Centennial Parkway from the State Farmers Market. It's surrounded by a variety of uses, but pretty much all industrial mixed use and NC State Centennial campus. As noted in the staff report and by staff in the presentation, Duke is under contract to purchase this property to build an electrical substation, and the purchase is contingent on rezoning. So a little bit about project reasonableness and need. This new substation is needed to help ensure adequate capacity to serve the area's unprecedented growth. This is specifically related to development plan around Dix Park, Centennial Campus, and downtown South. It'll also help improve reliability in this area and help facilitate faster restoration of utility loss in the event of unforeseen power outages. One of the things that Duke's looks at when locating a substation is if the property is already crossed by an existing transmission line. This eliminates the need to build new transmission lines and reduces impacts on surrounding areas. The new substation would be unmanned, remotely monitored, and would not require any water or sewer connections, so traffic impact would be minimal to the site. In terms of the current zoning, as mentioned, the property is split zoned and encumbered by many different zoning conditions in place since about the mid-'80s. Early on, Duke approached the city about this property specifically for a substation, and because of all the various zoning conditions, it was recommended that we come here before you and just kind of start with a clean slate. So we've proposed to rezone it to OX5 conditional use and currently have restricted several uses and limited office space to no more than 160,000 square feet, though candidly no office space is intended to be built here. In terms of existing conditions on the site, this is just kind of important for context because they restrict the development of the property generally. Much of the property is in a flood zone or a flood hazard area. Again, not great for larger, higher intensity uses. And there is that existing transmission line that you can see in yellow that bisects pretty much a good chunk of the northwestern part of the property, which not ideal for development for the property for other uses, ideal for Duke's use as a substation. As a note, you might be aware, but Dominion recently completed work to install a gas pipeline along Lake Wheeler, so there was some clearing that happened on the property associated with that. So with the existing conditions, the Greenway connector, which I'll talk to about in a moment, We didn't offer any frontage at this point because the buildable area is pretty limited here. In terms of neighborhood engagement, Duke held the required 2 neighborhood meetings, and we also met with the Southwest Raleigh Community Engagement Group in January for kind of a 3rd informal meeting. We were invited to come present to them. By far, the primary feedback that we received both from city staff and these neighborhood meetings are requests to, 1, preserve the existing pathway that connects the Centennial Bikeway connector to Walnut Creek Trail. And the second is to potentially formalize, there's like a footpath that pedestrians and bikers are using between Lake Wheeler to the existing brighter green path that you'll see on the screen. The issue here is that Walnut Creek Trail, when it crosses Lake Wheeler, it actually goes underground. And right now there's no existing easy access from Walnut Creek Trail to that side of Lake Wheeler. So people are informally crossing this site. So those are the 2 kind of main things we heard. And Duke is currently exploring potential language for those zoning conditions and would actually like to come back before this commission to provide that language. It's just taking a lot of thought and intention in, how this zoning condition language would be, whether we would offer greenway easements, which would be our preference, how we would determine location because of the kind of small buildable footprint of this property. But we are very much sensitive to those concerns of neighbors and do want to address them. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions that you might have about the project.
Thank you very much. All those in favor of this project, we don't have our time clock going, but any other members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project, please come to the podium and introduce yourself.
Good morning, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Brian Thomas. I live at 1121 Harper Road, and I'm generally in support of this rezoning. I'm also a member of the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Commission, and I serve as a liaison to the Greenway Committee from BPAC. And I'm here to essentially advocate for the Greenway connector that is shown in purple on the map. I've been a longtime bike commuter in this area. I've used that routinely to get to NC State. And as evidenced by the increased infrastructure investment here, this is a very rapidly growing area, and I would just love to see more access to the Greenway for people, especially living just south of the Beltline like I do. We can see the Greenway as we cross Lake Wheeler, but there's no way to get to it easily. So would really just like to advocate for inclusion of that, and I appreciate that the applicant has described this to you this morning. I didn't have to go into detail about that, so I appreciate that. That's really all I wanted to do is advocate for inclusion of that access. So thank you.
Hold a second. Mind if I ask a follow-up question? Yeah.
Perhaps when we bring it back to the table, if that's okay. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? Then seeing none, we will open it up to public comment for those in opposition. Any of those opposed are welcome to come to the podium and please introduce yourself. But seeing none, we can bring it back to the table for Commissioner Otwell. Thank you.
Mr. Thomas, would you just help me understand what purpose that purple route serves? I understand it's primarily folks coming south across the Beltline, from the south across the Beltline?
Right. So as you cross the Beltline coming from the south, there is a sidewalk on the western side of Lake Wheeler. You can look down from that sidewalk and see the Walnut Creek Greenway Trail. I've even witnessed people scrambling up and down that embankment just trying to get to and from the trail. And as you progress further down Lake Wheeler towards the farmer's market, there is an informal I guess goat path is the term for it, where people routinely walk maybe 150 yards to access the green connector trail. And the clearing that was mentioned has happened along Lake Wheeler Road. Approximately 2 acres, I would say, have been cleared as part of the Dominion pipeline work. And that has even increased the activity along that informal trail because it's much more visible now that the land has been cleared there. There's a gravel drive that runs down to close to the Greenway connector. Prior to that clearing happening, there was a small sign at the entrance of the purple connector trail that said NC State Natural Area Access. So that was recognized as an access point to a natural area by NC State, but they were not interested in turning that into a formal greenway access. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, that covers it. Thank you.
Thank you. Other thoughts from the commissioners? Or any follow-up, Commissioner Oil? Yes.
Completely different question. This is for staff. The state is the current owner. That's not what's listed in the report. Venkata Reddy LLC is the property owner. Am I looking at the right one?
I think that's the prior.
That's the last one.
case.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay, so what obligations does the state have to conform to city development standards? None. It's not so much. I'm thinking in particular of like the bandwidth development, which didn't follow our zoning guidelines.
I'm not sure. I might defer to Bynum.
There was a change made to 160D 913, which deals with the applicability of city zoning, county zoning on state-owned property. And when they adopted the budget last year, they basically, for the most part, removed most of Raleigh's zoning authority over state-owned property. If this is developed after it's sold to Duke, then Duke obviously doesn't enjoy the same freedom that the state provided itself with that change. Is that
Yeah,
clear?
thank you. So having watched the bandwidth development with some dismay, there's a lack of urban form connection, I think this is a great opportunity to get this transfer and support this substation. So, thank you.
Just to clarify, it's a good opportunity to, I just didn't hear that part.
It's a good opportunity to transfer this important piece of land to another owner, so it would guarantee concurrence with Raleigh zoning.
Thank you. And did you have thoughts about the bike pedaling or the bike path?
Well, I look forward to seeing what the applicant comes back with, and anticipate some language around that.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to respond to the comments about the pedestrian path connection to the greenway?
Yeah, I think it essentially covered it. We're just trying to really explore what our options are and what the best way to work with the city is, whether it's a bike and pedestrian easement, whether it's a greenway easement, specifically whether the location of that existing purple path is in the best location, and how we tailor those kind of commitments in a zoning condition that takes in future development into account.
Thank you. Could staff provide some guidance on what might be the appropriate language that they're looking for here? Sorry, I'm listening to a lot of people.
Yeah, so there are a couple of different options as far as easements. The greenway easement is maintained by City of Raleigh Parks. A bike and ped easement is maintained by the property owner. So those are two options that they could include as far as a zoning condition at this stage that wouldn't require waiting for a future subdivision and dedication of an easement with Wake County. So
That would not require waiting on a
so
subdivision.
basically that would mean that later on they would have to include that language. If it's included as a zoning condition, then when they actually develop the site, they could either maintain the existing footpath or realign the footpath in some other way, depending on what their site development looks like. There's some flexibility here as far as what they would like to offer and what kind of easement they can provide if they would like to do that.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Peeler.
I'm not sure if this is a question for staff or the applicant, but I'm just curious why this needs a rezoning for a substation.
Yeah, so our understanding is when Duke originally approached the city about putting a substation on this property, because it's split zoned, and because there have been conditions that are, kind of remnants from the 80s, especially related to, I believe it's like the farmer's market, to work through all the existing conditions that are on the site and figure out what could be developed, the cleanest way to move, that would almost be impossible. So the cleanest way to move forward was to just do it with a clean slate and do a rezoning.
Thank you. Vice Chair Raines.
Thanks, Chair Miller. A couple of questions. One is more logistic for staff. If language is developed for conditions on an easement, whichever way it goes, and it comes back it sounds like it's going to come back to a subsequent meeting. Will we have a chance to comment on those, or will we have to vote on that without a second bite of the apple, so to speak?
They can only revise conditions once.
Okay.
So you would have to make a decision or request an extension, I believe.
Understood. Thanks for clarifying that. And then I understand for the applicant, the site has a lot of challenges. However, with the substation on a prominent corner, is there any potential to have some sort of landscape, lack of a better word, buffer, screening the substation from the Lake Wheeler and Centennial Parkway?
So I know that, let me pull up my notes here. A Tier 3 site plan, which this might be, would require at least 3.5-foot buffer, 5-foot bike lane. This is all along Lake Wheeler Road. As far as screening, I would have to double check to see if there's, if an institutional use or some kind of building like a substation would be required to be screened based on UDO requirements. I'll have to double check on that, but I can follow up with you at the next meeting.
Okay, thanks. If there's not specific language, would, I guess, the applicant be willing to add something above and beyond current entitlements?
Sure. I think that's definitely something that we can discuss with Duke and see if that's a possibility. I will say that this isn't planned to be a traditional kind of open air substation. It is intended to be what's called a GIS or gas insulated substation, which is enclosed in a building. So from the street, it's going to be a little bit more aesthetically pleasing in the first place.
Thanks for clarifying.
Thank you. Other comments from the commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Haber.
Yep, I would like to follow up to Commissioner Rain's comments. Those were mine as well. I would like to mention to the applicant that it would be great to consider that bikeway connection. Appreciate you doing that and being willing to come back. It's important. I think you'll understand that just working through it, so thank you for that. I had similar concerns about screening, and I guess an additional question to staff would be, are there any specific tree conservation requirements along Lake Wheeler that might also alleviate my concerns? Appreciate that it's going to be more of an enclosed building, but that sort of also causes me some concerns, because I'm sure y'all aren't going to want to articulate that building. And while it's not going to be an open air substation, generally that building's probably not going to be the most attractive. So I would still like to know about any requirements for screening by code or tree conservation. Otherwise, I would like to just see if the applicant would consider, understanding you need clearances and access and all the things that come with substations that are important, at least just consider some type of screening if it were possible.
Thank you. Was that a question for staff about tree conservation requirements along Lake Wheeler?
I can follow up with that as well.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Bennett.
Just a question. I'm fully supportive of the Greenway, excuse me, and path connection, but I was wondering, are there any safety or security concerns about having the substation there and this public access, people meandering around it?
Not that I know of. I don't know if that's a discussion the applicants had with, well, you had with Duke.
Yeah, I think those are things that we're all kind of taking into account in our discussion of these, potential greenway easements and access points and how we best kind of protect around that. But the substation itself will have the traditional security measures of normal substations in the city.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Then I know the applicant said they would like additional time to revise or review conditions. Our next Planning Commission meeting is on August 23rd. I believe our deadline for action in this case is our next meeting is August 13th. Our deadline for action is August 24th. Would the applicant be ready to present at the August 13th meeting?
Yes, that would be our preference.
Thank you very much. Then I would like to make a motion to defer this case to our August 13th regular meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes 9-0. Thank you very much. Moving on to approval of the minutes. We have one set of minutes from our June 11th Planning Commission regular meeting. Are there any comments on the minutes? Then with that, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Chair Miller, I move to approve the minutes for June 11th, 2024.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? I'm sorry, any further discussion? Oh, yes. Excuse me. Yes. What, we rescind that motion?
I may need help
Vote?
from Commissioner Fox here, but I think it was the first page of the minutes where it says there was discussion regarding greenway connectivity in the area. I'm anticipating if council should ask you to explain that further, it might need to be expanded upon a little bit about exactly what that discussion was. And it was around the connectivity not showing on the comprehensive plan.
If I may, the connectivity did not complete the connection, so it stubbed short of the street, and the hope was that the greenway connection was going to go to the street. And so because I noticed my comment was in there as well, but this provides an opportunity to look at other greenway maps to see where connection points are potentially stubbed early.
Thank you. Did you want to add, make sure that's included in the minutes or just from my presentation? Okay, thank you. Any further discussion of the minutes? Then I believe, was that a friendly amendment by Commissioner Bennett to add that change, to approve the minutes with that change?
Yes, Chair Miller, thank you.
We have a friendly amendment. Do we need a second to a friendly amendment?
Second.
The person who seconds. When you have a motion that's been seconded and someone offers a friendly amendment, both the person who made the motion and the person who seconded it are to consent to
Okay,
that. So.
I consent. Or who made the motion to approve?
I did. So I consent.
And Commissioner McCrimmon, you seconded. Do you consent? I consent. So consented. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes 10-0. Thank you, everyone. And moving on to other business, report from the chair. This is our final meeting of this fiscal year, which means that we are going to adjourn for the summer, and our next meeting will be August 13th. The final report of the Planning Commission to City Council for this fiscal year will occur next Tuesday, July 2nd, and staff is working hard to accelerate their work so that all recommendations that we made today can be in front of Council next week and not held back another 2 months. So as this is the final meeting of the year, I just wanted to express my sincere gratitude for each and every one of the commissioners at this table. To our committee chairs this past year, Nicole Bennett and Roberta Fox, and to my vice chair, Dean Raines. This work is often not only thankless, but difficult publicly and personally trying. And all of you are volunteers who have spent perhaps hundreds of hours this year away from your work and families in order to better support our community, in often small but important ways that the greater public will never directly know about and that most likely will never be recognized. So I think this is the essence of true public service, and I'm grateful to each and every one of you for your time and commitment.
Second.
Yes. I'd also like to thank staff for another great year, seeing it's at the end, we're always alone here. To Bynum, David, Chinitha, to I think to everyone who was here, to Hannah, to Sally, to everyone that I saw in the audience today, and everyone who was not here today. There have been many complex and large-scale cases this year, and you run a tight ship. And I want to thank you for your honest, for your guidance, your professionalism, and your witty and wise leadership that keeps us honest, informed, and effective. And your support has set a tone for camaraderie and open debate among the commission that is very rare in politics these days and is critical to the success of our decisions as a commission and as a city. So Raleigh is a better place thanks to the work of every person at this table and behind the scenes, and thank you all. Moving down the line.
Oh, thank you. That was awesome. I agree with everything you said. I think everyone here works hard and has great comments. I definitely thank all the staff and Shanitha and Bynum and David for their assistance and expertise and guidance. I think that's really important for this group. So
thank you.
Thanks, Blaney. I don't have any other comments. Our next meeting for the committee of the whole is August 22nd. Yes.
I just want to say thank you for all that you do. I know our first meeting back is going to be August 13th. I may not be here. I'm going on a birthday trip to France. And so,
I'm sorry.
Poor me. But thanks for all that we're doing as a collective unit to move our city forward. It's important work that we're doing, although we're volunteers and some of us are paid, but just saying thank you for all we're doing for our city.
No report.
Let me echo the thank yous, and thank you also to Chair Miller for all you do as well, for running this ship. So we appreciate you. I enjoy working with everybody here, and I would love to go to France. Our next text change committee meeting will be August 21st at 1 p.m. in room 305. I am going to New Orleans in August, so maybe I can speak French there. So.
Close enough. That's right. Close enough. All right. Thanks all. Thank you, Bynum. I guess thank you also, Mr. York. Anyway. Okay, I tease. I'd also, again, thank you, Chair Miller, Vice Chair Raines, for your leadership. Also, the leadership of many of those at the table, and when we're ready to make a nomination for officers, I'm ready to do so. But I did want to mention Strategic Planning Committee. We do have a meeting scheduled for August 14th at 3 p.m. in this building in room 303. And that's it.
Thank you.
No report, but I do appreciate and thank city staff. And it's been a pretty incredible year, another one for the books. So thanks so much for everything. Appreciate it.
No comment. I'll just, of course, echo all the thank yous. There's a few people left, but am starting my third term on Planning Commission. And have seen this board change significantly over the last 4 years. And it's a good group. It's a lot of work. I enjoy being here and debating issues with all of you. And appreciate everybody's thoughtfulness and commitment. So it's a lot of work. I was hoping maybe I wouldn't do the third term, but I'm glad that I'm here because I appreciate serving on this board and really look back and think about when I started and where we are now. And so credit to everybody up here. So thank y'all.
Yeah, I mean, no report, but thank you to staff so much. Y'all do so much work. It's been my first year. It perfectly rounds out the first year for me on the commission. It's been a lot of fun, and I've learned a whole lot from all of y'all. And thank you for putting up with all my basic questions, because I think I'm maybe the only one here that doesn't have like formal planning background. So, but yeah, it's been an awesome learning experience. Thanks again.
I don't have anything to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, I will also just note, I think on the city website, it does have listed a meeting for a committee of the whole and for infrastructure mobility, but there's nothing on the agenda. So there are no meetings this week related to those things. So moving on to report from the assistant director.
I do want to echo all of the thanks. I love it when you're here. It's beautiful to see all 10 of you today. And I'm also looking forward to not seeing all 10 of you for several weeks. We all deserve a break. Go to France, go to Louisiana, do whatever. Get a break, rest up, stay cool, and we will see you on the 13th.
Thanks. Yes, Mr. York.
There's not a report for the attorney because you hear enough from me. But I do want to say it's been a pleasure working with you all this year, and that you may already know this, but you're the highest profile board or commission the city has, because everything on your agenda ends up on the city council's agenda. Okay, so like it or lump it, it's you have the highest profile agenda, because what you see is what ends up in front of council. And you also meet a lot, which may or may not have been explained to you when you agreed to this. No, so it's a huge commitment. And when I was in private practice and had the privilege of serving on commissions for the city, I chose ones that didn't meet this often. And so monthly meetings was it. But anyway, I do tip my hat to each of you for the time commitment and the consideration you give to all these cases. Because of these items all go to city council, and they're highly regulated, the procedure is under 160D. It's very important that you all do things a certain way, and that's why I annoy you like I do. Today you've given me a challenge on Robert's rules. I appreciate the little quiz, but it's great working with you all, and I enjoyed this year.
Thank you so much. And with that, we can move on to the election of the officers. The officers' terms serve for the fiscal year, so they start July 1st and run through June 30th. So at the end of the fiscal year, we vote for the officers for the following term. We used to have 3 officers, chair, vice chair, and secretary, but we eliminated that in the bylaws, the secretary position in the bylaws, since that was always deferred to staff. So we have 2 officer positions that are open, chair and vice chair. And I think I've spoken with everyone that reached out to me about leadership interest. And with that, I'd like to entertain a motion for chair. Yes, Commissioner Bennett.
I would like to move I would like to nominate Commissioner Miller to continue serving as chair of the Planning Commission.
Thank you very much.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion or debate? Then all those in favor? Am I allowed to vote? Can I vote against? That motion, any opposed? That motion passes 10-0. Thank you, everyone. Do we have a nomination for vice chair? Commissioner Fox.
I would like to nominate Commissioner Bennett for vice chair this year.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion or debate? Then all those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes 10-0. Thank you very much. We did it. Any further discussion for the good of the business, for the good of the order? And with that, we are adjourned. I'll see you in August.